This building is the Great Synagogue of London. Closed. This dark and narrow passage leads to St. James's Place. Watson, we are now in the exact spot where poor Eddowes tragically ended her days.
This spot is very dark, Holmes.
That is probably why our murderer chose it. A thimble is located right beside one of the victim's hands, just like Chapman's sachet of pills and Stride's pastils. Do these objects spread out by the victim remind us of anything, Watson? The head is turned towards the left. The murderer must have been on the right side of his victim. Let's look at her from the front. The eyelids were cut off. The nose was cut. The cheeks were slashed to make them thinner. There is but one wound, Watson. It goes from the left side and descends in a slight oblique towards the right side. These intestines were pulled out altogether to grant access to the abdomen. The main incision goes from the sternum all the way down to the groin. The murderer opened this abdomen as if it were an animal carcass. A kidney was removed. The uterus was removed. The inside of the thighs is clean. Once again, there were no sexual relations between the victim and her murderer. Part of this apron is missing. We will follow up on that shortly.
My goodness, Holmes, it was a slaughter.
Understand, Watson, that our killer had neither the time nor the conditions to bother with the niceties. He had no more than 7 or 8 minutes at most to kill the woman, open her up, and all the while in total darkness.
Holmes, it's a woman, a poor victim you're talking about.
Consider all the time this man lost and the risks that he actually took by cutting the victim's face and the lower abdomen in around 20 precise spots, especially the lungs and the liver. These attacks, which I considered gratuitous, are in fact nothing of the sort and have as much sense as the removal of the organs. We must, first and foremost, locate the 3 exits leading to Mitre Square, Watson. This is Mitre Street, from where Watkins, the constable who found the body, came. Watson, we must now consult our timescale. We began in Dutfield's yard, but this time we will try to recreate the actions of certain people, in this case, those of the 2 policemen. At 1:30 a.m., P.C. Watkins didn't see the corpse while on his rounds. If P.C. Watkins did his rounds properly, and there is no reason to doubt this was the case, as he discovered the corpse a quarter of an hour later, the murder hadn't yet taken place, and there was no one in Mitre Square, unless they were hidden among the shadows. Enter Mitre Square via Mitre Street, Watson, and stop and try to see me with the lantern. I will be where poor Eddowes' corpse was.
I see you, Holmes.
Perfect, Watson. Let's look at our timeline, Watson. Very good, Watson. Thus we can categorically state that the murder had not yet occurred at 1:30. 1:35 a.m. A man and a woman are arguing at the entrance of Church Passage. The man came from Aldgate. 1:42 a.m. PC Harvey arrives in Mitre Square. It should be noted, Watson, that the constable didn't enter Mitre Square. He could not have seen the corpse lying on the ground. But would he have been able to see a man sitting or standing? Go to the church passage entrance, then come back and try to see me while holding your lantern. I will stay at the spot where the victim was discovered.
I see you, Holmes.
You had to proceed into the square in order to see me, something Harvey didn't do. It is possible that the killer was still there. 1:42 a.m. PC Harvey arrives at Mitre Square, but does not go in. The murderer may well have still been there. 1:44 a.m. The body is discovered. Let's put the murder of poor Eddowes on the timeline, Watson. 1:35 and 1:42 a.m. The murder would appear to have taken place between these times, that is to say, within 7 minutes.
Agreed, Holmes. But does this really prove that our killer had the time to perpetrate these two murders?
Let's look at our timeline, Watson. There, Watson, we are now certain that the murderer really had the time to commit these two murders.
Incredible!
Let's look at our deduction board, Watson.
This spot is making me nauseous. Can we not head back, Holmes?
We certainly can't, Watson. We have one final point to address. Do you remember the piece of white apron that was missing just now? It was found just a few steps away from here, at the entrance of a building. That's where we must go. Let's go! There's the spot, Watson. By night, Goulston Street is deathly silent, which will permit us to carry out a fair few experiments. Let's find the entrance where the piece of the victim's apron and the mysterious chalk message were found.